This is when I get into the research parts. And unfortunately, it turns out that those slides are, I don't know if you know, but my laptop got reformatted remotely by the IT department. Most of the other slides are easy to recover, but the ones with the math on and the figures, they are difficult. So there will be some pieces of the puzzle missing. You have to fill in the blanks. And of course, now when it's about research, I can't take credit for anything anymore. So this is my grad students that's done all the content of these presentations. So if we go to the research challenges for intervehicular cyber-physical systems, so not just within the vehicle, but in between vehicles. There are some problems because most of the communication standards and protocols, they are optimized for what they were developed for, which could be voice or data, but not cyber-physical system data. So like sensor data or time-critical data. So for this to work properly, the communication needs to be predictable. The delay needs to be predictable. Real-time doesn't mean fast, it's predictable. It needs to be reliable. And if there's multiple nodes, it needs to be fair and scalable. So the problems that we have is these concurrent requirements on real-time and reliability. We have been dealing with one of them in the past, but not two at the same time. And also because it's real-time, the traditional performance metrics, they are not really applicable. So it's not throughput or channel capacity anymore. And since we know from my two previous lectures that communication can never be reliable 100%, it's the application who needs to be reliable 100%. So you need to deal with whatever transient errors that the communication experiences, and this needs to be picked up by the applications. And the good news for the application reliability is that you can always trade off temporarily lower reliability for autonomy. So if it drops below, then you go from guide to advice. And when the quality goes up again, you can go up. So if we will look at the first problem first, the traffic safety part, the following problems becomes predominant. And that's that we have mobile nodes and they move quite quickly. This changes the channel models rapidly, but also the network topology. So it's difficult to maintain stable network topologies. If you want to do traffic safety, you're supposed to broadcast your position, speed, and direction, or hazard warnings. In all cases, it's broadcast. So we know from the first lecture that if you want to increase reliability, you could retransmit. But what if the 75% of the intended recipients got the message and not the other ones? Is it received or is it not received? Do we retransmit or do we not retransmit? Do we do some min-max bounding or what? And also if we retransmit, it takes longer time, so delay increases. And even though real time doesn't mean run time or that it needs to go fast, it's still such that if you have a lower delay, you give the driver a longer time to react, whether it's an autonomous driver or if it's a human driver. And if we rely on cellular technology, we could go into places where it's not coverage, so where there's no base stations. And if it's a safety feature, this doesn't really work. So that's one of the arguments for using ad hoc networks, that as long as there's somebody there to collide with, there's also somebody there to communicate with. If there's nobody there to communicate with, there's also fewer to collide with. So this brings us into ad hoc networks, vehicular ad hoc networks. The characteristics of such networks is that it's decentralized, so there's no central controller that can redistribute resources like access points or base stations. So you have peer-to-peer communications, which means that all the nodes are similar communication capabilities. Nobody has a stronger transmit power or more antennas. They are all the same. From a communications point of view, they might not be the same from some application point of view, but communication point of view. So this network can contain roadside units, but they are still in ad hoc mode. They are still peers. They are just not moving. That's the only difference. And because it's an ad hoc network and we want to talk to everybody around in the same network, you use a common communication channel. So if it's a centralized network, you want to get internet access or something, then you can communicate to the internet without caring about the other guys. But here we need to talk to each other in this geographical area. So we're sharing the same communication channel, or the same communication channels, if you want. So it's broadcast. Broadcast means we can't really do traditional automatic repeat request. We could do it by sending 2 transmissions at the same time if we want to, but we can't just patch up things that didn't go right the first time. And we don't really know how many participating nodes we have. We can't do admission control or any other things that we do to handle scalability issues. We need to handle all the nodes that are in the vicinity. So this brings up challenges for the MAC layer. So if you want to have reliable communication, you need to have predictable access to the channel. So if you can't transmit because there's a delay, it doesn't matter if the channel, how good the transmission is once it's transmitted. If you can't say anything, it doesn't help. So you need to have predictable access, and this needs to be guaranteed even though it's decentralized. So if it's a centralized network, it's like having a chairman giving the word to everybody in a fair and nice way. And this is like without governments, just talking. And we need to still have predictable access and make sure that nobody's talking at the same time. And we can't restrict the number of participant nodes. So access needs to be fair, and we need to provide for good scalability. Most importantly, scalability in terms of number of nodes. So since it's still controlled data, we can limit the amount of data that we want to transmit. It's not like we're transmitting loads of images or videos. So it's quite low data, but we need to scale well with the number of nodes. So interference depends on data collisions. And this in turn depends on, because it's wireless, depends on the distance to the nearest neighbors. So if we can have concurrent transmission, but if they happen one in Stockholm and one in Halmstad, it's not the end of the world. So it needs to be as a function of the distance. So if you have these periodic position messages and don't manage to transmit it within a certain amount of time, you become invisible, like a ghost vehicle. And this is problematic if the algorithm assumes that all vehicles transmit position, speed, and direction. So if you remember my guys from the previous slides, this is the problem with medium access control. Everybody transmit position, speed, and direction. I'm here, I'm there. And the guys in between, they will not hear anything. So the guy over here, or me, for example, I will probably hear that guy because he's too far away. But the guy in the middle, he will have trouble. So for voice that has these real-time requirements, timeliness requirements, they therefore require predictable access. But this you solve because you have a centralized networks. So in the second generation cellular system, they use TDMA. So each base station hands out time slots to different users so that they can use. So this works fine and it's fair, it's predictable and scalable. The only time it's not predictable is when you come to a base station for the first time before you have gotten any time slots. But this is, again, when you make a call, you do admission control. You're trying to call, and if there's a network error, you wait a bit. So once you're there and hooked up to the base station, it works, and base stations can do handover in between them. So this becomes predictable, but it's fair, but somehow it's not scalable because the number of time slots when you run out of them, you can't add any more users. That's why you couldn't call at New Year's Eve in the old days with the old cell phone systems, because all the time slots in your closest base station were occupied. Same thing with football games. It stopped. So the third generation, it uses CDMA, code division multiple access. So instead of getting a time slot, you get a code, a unique code. So they are orthogonal. So it will become, when you explain it pedagogically, it's similar to getting your own language. So you get Chinese, I get Swedish. If I talk to a Swede in the room, I will still be able to hear him, even though the room is full of people talking, as long as the people speaks a language I don't get, like Chinese. So then I can still hear it. If they start to speak Norwegian or Swedish, it becomes more tricky. So because everybody has a unique code, it becomes same way as TDMA, predictable. It can be unfair, and that is because it's more scalable. So it's more graceful degradation. And that means that as soon as we run out of orthogonal codes, we start to hand out almost orthogonal codes, like Swedish and Danish. Swedish and Finnish will be okay, then we can. So, and these guys that are close to each other, the languages that are close to each other, it's a bit unfair to them because the Chinese and the German guys, they can still speak. But the ones that get these not completely orthogonal, then it's unfair to them. But it's more graceful degradation. You can keep on adding more users. The quality of everybody will eventually be reduced, but it's not like a binary thing. So now no more time slot. But still you need to have some centralized access point or base station that hands out these resources in a network. So for the ad hoc vehicular standards, the one currently proposed, I mean, there's a cell phone one doing also ad hoc, but there's still the cell phone. So the one supporting a complete VARNet is 802.11p, and its MAC method is CSMA. So CSMA is carrier sense multiple access. Means you listen if somebody's talking. If you hear somebody talking, you keep quiet. You sense the carrier. If it's quiet, you talk. If it's not quiet, you send. If it is somebody talking, you wait a bit. And because everybody should not do the same thing, so you hear me talking and then you wait a bit, and then as soon as I start talking, you jump in and talk at the same time. Because we don't want to have that, because then you all will be talking at the same time. You need to wait a random time after I finish talking. That means that you will not collide, because the one that randomizes the shortest time will go first, and the other ones will keep waiting. So this is very suitable when you don't have when you don't have heavily loaded networks, or when you have traffic that comes in bursts a bit. But if it's periodic, then in the worst case, it will interfere each period. The good thing is that you can have arbitrary packet sizes, has low complexity, you don't need to synchronize or anything. But from a real-time perspective, it becomes unpredictable and unfair. So the problems identified with the MAC method used in the 11p is that you have unpredictable channel access. So periodic messages needs to be sent within its time period. If it needs to wait a random time, this will be a problem. And also you can actually interfere with the transmitter, not just interfere with the receiver, so it has a bad reception, but interfere with the transmitter, so it never says anything. So if it's never allowed to say anything until the deadline expired, a new position message becomes available, it causes packets to be dropped at the sending node. And then all your fancy coding things you invented are useless, because you never get to talk. And in some attempt to be efficient, I suppose, they let 11p use the highest priority in this quality of service amendment. And this highest priority means that the back-off times that you have to wait, they are short, which means they are fewer. And also the idle time in between packets are also shorter. But this means that in 11p there is only 4 different random back-off values. So if you have a zillion nodes, they would randomize either the same packet or one of the 4, and then they would collide in 4 different times. So this has no correspondence to how far away the nodes are from each other. So two concurrently transmitted nodes randomizing the same backoff might be very close together. So we did some simulations, slash calculations, where we don't have a channel model. We just look at the probability of the transmitter remaining quiet, the transmitter never being allowed to transmit. So here we have the delay, the channel access delay, as a function, or the cumulative distribution function of the delay for this one. And what you want it to do is that it goes up to 1. If it goes up to 1, it means that all the packets get sent eventually. If it doesn't go up to 1, it means that you drop some packet, so the delay is infinite. So then we had a big freeway with lots of different nodes. Here we have approximately 230 nodes within range. They transmit packet size 500 bytes. The sensing range, the range where they need to be quiet if they hear somebody within 1,000 meters. And they report every 10 hertz. So it's slightly overloaded. If you just try to nicely put it together, it's not going to fit all of it. So yeah, so it's not going to, regardless of Mach method, it will be tough to get up to 100%. But that's not the main problem. The main problem is that there's a big difference between the mean and the worst case and the best case. So the best case here, it drops only 23% of the packets. They are never transmitted. But the worst guy here, 84% of its packets is never transmitted. So most likely it's behind somebody that has the same report rate. So they always collide, back off, wait, collide, drop. So this is the main problem. It becomes very unfair. And if you want to have fair access, so this guy over here is very invisible. And the mean is about dropping half of them. So in control theory or industrial automation, if you have something that drops half of the packet, you would increase the sampling rate and transmit more frequently. This would cause even more problems and even more unfairness. So it doesn't help. It doesn't solve the problem. Because you can interfere with the transmitter. So if you remember our messages from yesterday, we have these cooperative awareness messages, periodic position messages. They have hard deadlines, but medium reliability. We have hazard warning messages, soft deadlines, but high reliability. So we would like to have a Mach method that is decentralized, it's self-organizing, it's fair, and it's predictable. So this would allow the periodicity of the cooperative awareness messages to be maintained also at the receiver side. And also it would have a low delay for delivering hazard warnings. So then we proposed another Mach method. It's called Selforganizing TDM. It's not our proposal. It's an inventor called Uhlemann who invented it. So the thing we did was to use it for this one and adapt it for the vehicular context. So the idea is here that you have a TDMA, so you get time slots, same way as you would in a centralized network, but they are not given to you by a central controller. You choose them yourself. So instead of selecting every 10th slot, you have a selection interval. So in between this interval, you're going to pick one slot, and then you have a distance between these intervals, which is corresponding to the report rate. So within each such selection interval, you randomly select a slot, and you make sure that you don't select the same one in here as you do in here. And also you keep these slots only for a certain number of time. So every now and then, the slot that you selected here is re-chosen. You can't pick the same one. And the same thing here. And also it's not re-chosen at the same time, most of the time. The number of time you keep the slot is also randomized. So the idea is here, even if you do collide in one of them, you're not going to collide in the next one. So the probability of consecutive collisions reduces quite heavily. And there's also a position message included in this. So in each slot, you transmit your position message. So if you hear somebody using a slot, you mark it. So for each slot, all nodes keep a record of who is transmitting in each of the slots. So which are occupied and which are free. You also transmit how long you're going to use the slot, so everybody knows it when you're going to switch. So when you select your slot, you select an empty one, something that nobody is using. If everybody is using it, note that not all nodes have the same selection interval. They are also shifted towards one another. But it could happen that all my slots in this interval are selected already. Because everybody transmit their position, speed, and direction, I know their position. So I'm going to take a slot that is already occupied, but occupied by somebody furthest away, thinking that then I can still talk to the guys next to me. So this is how it works. This STDMA, it's already in commercial use. All commercial ships over a certain length or over a certain gross ton has to use this. It's mandatory. It's called the automatic identification system. Some airplanes or some airports use it, but it's not mandatory for all airports. But if those that have it, then your airplane needs to have this one in order to be able to land. So it is specially designed for periodic message. So this cooperative awareness match is very similar to the AIS system, but the AIS system is a little bit slower because ships don't move that fast. So the idea is that when you have overloaded situations, you sort of control the collisions. So this is good because it's predictable. You know that you always get channel access. You don't know exactly, there's a little variation or a little jitter because you select within the selection intervals. You don't get exact same distance. But the jitter is still bounded because you know you can access the channel. Even if it's occupied, you still access. So you can't interfere with the transmitter in that sense. It's scalable. In the test, before they were allowed to use it for ships, they overloaded it with 700%, harbor in Japan, I think, without it collapsing. So it still provides fair access. The drawbacks is that packet sizes are fixed and it has higher complexity because you need to synchronize. You need to know where the slot stops and ends. So when you look at it from this cumulative distribution function of the channel access delay, still only on the transmitter side, you have here we loaded the network so that it's completely loaded, completely filled with packets all the time. This is the red one. Slightly underloaded and slightly overloaded. So you can see depending on the load, this carrier sends multiple access, then it varies. So if it's not fully loaded, all packets get sent, but with a jitter. But if it's fully loaded or overloaded, some packets are dropped because the CDF don't go up all until 1. So for STDMA, it doesn't depend on the load. You can have any load, still you will be able to transmit within a fixed time. So the only reason this one doesn't go straight is because you have the selection interval. So you will either get this first slot in the first selection interval and the last one in the last one. This gives maximum 1. Or you get the last one in the first interval and the first one in the last one. And then you get this one. So this is why it doesn't go completely straight. So it varies with this one. So this is the good part, that you get channel access. It is predictable. It doesn't depend on the channel load. Another drawback is once you actually start to transmit. So for CSMA, the collisions, they are also random. So if you're going to collide with somebody, you don't know where they are. So here we look at the distance between two transmitting nodes, two concurrently transmitting nodes. And this CDF for this distance. So it's normalized distance. So if you see for CSMA, Here's still the same loaded 80, 100 and 120. You can see that it's completely random for how it collides. So they can be close or they could be not so close. For STDMA, now the load matters because this is when we transmit. So how many are transmitting at the same time and how far away are they? So this of course changes depending on the load, but they're still pretty much on top of each other. So the idea is here that when you have a collision, you are aware of it. So you select somebody who is as far as possible away from yourself. So it means that you push the collisions further away in space. So this is two good things with this STDMA. So the problem that happens is that when you have two concurrent transmissions within CSMA, the standard MAC, you can have collisions that takes place randomly. So you don't know if they're going to be too close together or not. And all the guys that are in here, covered by two circles, they are affected. These guys, they are not affected. So you have a very high interference quite close to the nodes, and you can't decode if it's too much interference in the system. So for STDMA, you choose to be as far as possible away. This is not really possible because they need to be able to hear each other, but it's pedagogic as well. So the idea is then that you don't collide with somebody, these two guys, they don't collide. So if you want to collide, you're going to collide with somebody, maybe this one and this one and this one and this one. You try to collide with somebody as far away as possible. And probably the guys located very close to you are the ones that you want to talk to. They are the most important ones. So maybe this guy is less important for both this one and this one. So if they happen to collide, it's not the end of the world. And also the further away they are, because the signal transmit power, it lowers with distance. So it's not going to be as severe either if it's further away. So this is the idea of this. So we made some input to standardization. We have ETSI, let's call it the European version of IEEE, maybe. They made a specialist task force looking into the STDMA and the use of it for VARNETs. So the task force was led by my PhD student at the time, Katrin, and it concluded that STDMA is technically superior to VARNET. And everybody in the standardization committee thought it was a good idea, but too many economic investments and too much time had already got into the CSMA, so it didn't work. So we were saying that if we get a new frequency to play with, we can do it right from the beginning. But right now we drop it. And the other problem that I noticed within standardization is that STDMA is much more difficult to understand mathematically, and even if you explain, it's more difficult. So CSMA is quite straightforward to understand. So whenever something is difficult to understand, it's less likely to be used, less likely to be standardized. So if you want to convince masses, you keep it simple. That's why I start to replace equations with pictures. End of MAC experience. So now we're going to platooning. So the idea is that you have a road train, a platoon of trucks. So I was at the diesel part of Volvo, right? And commercial vehicles are the ones where you save most, or it's most beneficial to do platooning because they use quite a lot of fuel, and also they are less, you can spend more money on commercial vehicles than you can on private vehicles. So the idea is then that you can have a central control node. From a communications perspective, it does not need to be the platoon leader. It could be somebody in the middle, located more in the middle and have access to all the nodes. From an applications perspective, this needs to be the leader. From a communication perspective, it could be this one or it could be the same. It depends. It depends on the length of the platoon as well. And then you have coexisting periodic packets and event-driven packets. So all of these ones would exchange positions. And then if you want to disseminate an event, for example, the leading vehicle saying, I'm braking, then you do it through transmitting backwards. So platooning can be seen as a first step towards autonomous driving. You follow the leader with a minimum distance. You do like breadcrumb tracking. So the benefits: reduced fuel consumption, quite a lot actually. So I think it's around 20% or something for vehicle number 2. And I'm terrible at remembering numbers, but there's some numbers on how much engines are optimized. So if you want to save 1%, it's like, $1 million or something, because it's already researched and optimized so much. So if you get 20% by happy-go-lucky platooning, this is good. Even the leading vehicle saves, so up to 8%, because it's these things, aerodynamic waves that pulls back, they get messed up by the vehicle in the back. So everything is good. If we make it automated completely, we can also have drivers. They probably need to be in the truck, but they all need to be on alert all the time. Truck drivers, they are very strictly regulated when they are supposed to drive and sleep. So if they can sleep and get home at the same time, it will be good. And they just use driver for tricky situations. In some sense, it's increased safety as well, because you can already see the truck drivers doing this on the road without having the systems in place. They do it already. So if they have a system that actually helps, then it will be better. So you still share the same channel, exchange status data and hazard warnings, but all of a sudden we have a stable network topology. It's not ad hoc and moving around. It's very stable. Almost like stationary, but the whole thing is moving. So we can have a central method. So problem solved, or? Well, it's these ones. They are sort of competing with each other a bit. So what's the most important thing? Transmit the periodic position message, or transmit the hazard warning, or combine them whenever there's a hazard. So there's a challenge still, because you can have wireless, you have the wireless medium causes packet loss, which is true everywhere. And also, even if you have a centralized MAC methods, you can have platoons meeting or catching up with each other. So they could still collide if they have these centralized MAC methods not being coordinated in between them. So if we just want to look at performance measures, so previously we just looked at the channel access delay. So delay was caused by two things, like channel access delay and error rate. So now we came as far as we have access to the channel. So if we want to transmit, we want to look at the reliability, because this would minimize number of retransmissions. So if we want to have a good performance measures for CAM, cooperative awareness messages, is that we have up-to-date status of all the surrounding platoon members. So a good message would then be the age. How old is my CAM messages from the surrounding vehicles? So the worst case inter-arrival time of CAMs from one specific neighbors. Again, a min-max problem. And for hazard warnings, you have something quite different, because here you want to warn the platoon about something unexpected. Most likely with a minimum delay. This could be traded off, of course. If you want to change the update rate of the CAN message and communicate with this as an event-driven message, you have more time and you don't change until everybody heard it. But still, it could be situations where you want to do it with a minimum delay. So then a good measure would be the dissemination delay. So how long does it take from the hazard warning starting to be spread, transmitted for the first time, until every vehicle in the platoon has received a warning about the event? This would be the dissemination delay. So then they need to coexist. So we had the idea that we use some slots. We use time slots, which you can use because it's centralized. You can put a time slotted scheme on top of the CSMA things and have it centralized. So each vehicle transmit their periodic CAM message. If you want to be nice, you distribute these CAM messages evenly in time, so that they don't come together in a big lump, because during this big lump nobody can send event-driven messages. So if you try to spread them out evenly, you have time for events in between. So you have some sort of hyperframe. Hyperframe is from when the first one starts to transmit their CAM until everybody has transmit their CAM. And we assume that everybody in the same platoon have the same CAM repeat rate. So the remainder of the slots that are not occupied by these position messages, they can be used for disseminating events. And then you can have help of relayers, other guys in the platoon. So this was the idea then, that if we call this CAM message periodic positioning messages, in the US they are sometimes called beacon, which is fast and short, so I call it that too. So we have the beacon for vehicle number 1, and then we have the beacon for vehicle number 2. And in between you have a place for event-driven messages. So these ones can be numbered so that you say that in the first one, this is a hyperframe. So in the first slot, we have vehicle number 1 being allowed to transmit an event-driven message. If he doesn't want to, it's empty. In the next one, vehicle 2 transmitting event. If it's empty, it doesn't want to. In the next one, vehicle 3 transmitting an event. In this case, it has an event. So it starts to transmit its message. And then we want to dedicate a number of relay nodes. So depending on the reliability requirements of the message, we have a number of relayers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how much we want. And this means that normally vehicle number 4 would be allowed to transmit here, but because there was an event initiated by vehicle number 3, it doesn't. Instead, the relayer relays the message, and this is decided up front. So it might be number 4, but it might be somebody else. And then you do this, and then whenever there's an event that sort of comes at the same time as a beacon, you just wait and continue the event in the next time. So once you have an ongoing event, it can't be interrupted by other events. So then you just need to do this relay selection. How do you select relayers such that the reliability is maximized given a set of time slots? So let's say we have a fully connected wireless networks, meaning that the front vehicle and the last vehicle in the platoon can hear each other. Then you can have the channel coefficients characterized in a packet error rate matrix. You have time is slotted. Each message transmitted from the source to the destination have a set of time slots. And the first one is always allocated to the originator of the message. And then the remaining ones are dedicated for relaying. So once if you are a relayer, you listen in the time slots where the source transmit, the first relayer or whenever. And then if you are relay number K, when we come to the relay slot that is called, let's call it A sub K, you will either transmit or keep quiet. If you got the message, you transmit. If you don't get it, you keep quiet. Otherwise, we don't know how to reassign. So we made algorithms we did both things. We calculated which selection of relayers would be optimal, given all types of events being transmitting or keeping quiet. And we did different selections of this. And then we did a low complexity algorithm, and this is the part that my slides that are lost. So we did some low complexity algorithms, so we could also do it online and comparing to the exhaustive search version of it. And so you can't see the math. No. Now you see this one instead. So we have a platoon. And if we have, in this case, we want to broadcast a message from the leading vehicle to the last one. We did it both for unicast and broadcast. But in this case, we want to have it in the last one. So if you only have one time slot, we only have the option of vehicle number 1 transmitting to vehicle number 12. Then you have this is the packet error probability, and this is the delay. So if you have 2 time slots, the algorithm selects this guy. Before I started, I would have thought it would select something in the middle. But this has to do with the channel model and how it decreases the power with distance. So this one is the safest bet to do. So then it will do 2 time slots, 1, 4, and 12. Similar performance, I think, was also 1, 9, or 12. And then the probability of error will be like this, but it takes longer. So then you can still compare to having retransmissions using this 2 time slots for the same guy just retransmitting. And similarly, if you have 3 time slots, you can see that reliability increases. Reliability increases, but so is the delay. So and here we have, let's see, we have 2 different ones. This is the broadcast scheme. So either you have, so this is still unicast thing. So you have a destination, the solid lines are destination node number 12. And the dotted lines are destination node number 8, something in the middle. So 8 and 12 being like this. And then we have 3 different options. Either we do exhaustive search, which is possible because we have quite few number of time slots. After a while, it doesn't become feasible anymore. So exhaustive search, just finding the best set of relayers. Compared to retransmission, the vehicle number 1 just retransmitting using all the time slot for this. And then we have compare also to a greedy search algorithm. So for every step, we just pick the best one. And once we're done, we pick the best one in the next one. We don't optimize the whole thing on the same, in the same time. And you can see that it makes quite a difference, whether you have exhaustive search or exhaustive search or greedy search or just retransmitting. Greedy search, there will be the same in the beginning because the first one you select, then it's the same, but then it changes. Yeah, I'm sorry that some of these slides are, screenshots, so it becomes difficult to see. Yeah, so the idea is that you can use relaying when you have platooning, because you have a centralized networks, you can play around with your time slots and you can design them or select them appropriately. So depending on the complexity of the system, you can either do like an offline table and just assign things so that everybody knows before we start. Or if you have high complexity systems using low complexity algorithms, you can assign the relayers online based on the current channel situations. So then we're able to maximize the reliability given a set of time slots. Okay, so the challenges in research for platooning is for platooning to function properly, the communication needs to be predictable, fair, scalable, and reliable. The challenges is that you have decentralized networks where you can form temporarily stationary network topologies. You have inherent interference and scalability problems. They're starting to solve this by multiple antennas. In the beginning, they put it on the top of the truck, but the truck has a big container on it. So if they are close together, the antennas are sort of boxed in between 2 containers. So this becomes bad. So now they have it in the side view mirrors, which is also good because if it's the platoon is turning, you have line of sight on one of them, always. You have concurrent requirements on real-time and reliability, and the normal performance metrics like throughput, they are not applicable anymore, and they are applicable to centralized networks. So the delay, because you can have a reliable communication if you just keep on retransmitting, this is still problems if you have cyber-physical systems that is time critical. So the delays in communication are caused by 2 parts. The channel access delay, which depends on the MAC method, So you need to have an upper bound on the channel access delay to schedule this properly. And then the overall delay, which can never ever be upper bounded because it depends on the channel error rate. So you can only get probabilistic guarantees. The end. Now you're supposed to say, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Elisabeth.
I was a bit late, but I started a bit late.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
They want coffee.
Coffee at this time of the day is very attractive.
Yes.
I have a question. So looking at all these different techniques, if one kind of didn't have the constraints of what's the state of the art in industry today and what are the technologies that are kind of most widely used and available and so on, how would one kind of, if one steps back and thinks about choosing between all these different possibilities for protocol design and so on, if you had the opportunity to do that, how would you do it?
Do it right from the beginning. So this is the main problems that we have in factory automation. So all things that we want to go wireless, we need to still be backwards compatible, and we need to be able to handle heterogeneity. So we have these protocols like wireless HART, which is overall a kind of bad protocol, but that's the best there is because it needs to have interact with the existing things. So it will be too expensive to change everything. And now we haven't started equipping the vehicles. What if we do it right from the beginning? TDMA? Or, yeah.
Okay.
So that will be, yeah. So we still have time to do it right from the beginning, so I think we should. That's why the fighting is important.
So in a way, the only constraints are the frequency band. I mean, looking at it the other way around, it's like the frequency band is one constraint.
Well, once you have a communication technology in there, and once you start selling vehicles with the communication technology in there, everybody else needs to deal with that.
Follow,
yeah.
Yes. But right now, it's just the communication. I mean, would you say that that's the only constraint?
Yeah, standardization in communication only standardize the transmitter. The receiver is never standardized for two reasons. Reason number one, it doesn't have to. It still works as long as you know what you're transmitting. Reason number two, this is where they compete. The communication companies.
Okay.
If you can do something with lower energy, so they don't tell you. So this means that the only thing that is standardized when the vehicle goes out is what is transmitted.
Yep.
So as long as you deal with this, regardless if you have a new generation of things, it still works.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one question from Tao.
Why only probabilistic guarantees can be given to?
Because something can always go wrong.
Yeah,
Sun can
why
explode.
not the deterministic guarantee?
This is from the previous lecture. So in communications, there can always be errors because there's noise in communications. So you can only give probabilistic guarantees. But everybody can, also software, hardware people, it doesn't matter, control people, they can also only give probabilistic guarantee. If they say that they can give deterministic guarantees, it's because they forgot that they built something in the model that they can't. So if the probability is lower than two pilots having a heart attack at the same time, it can be considered deterministic. So I can say that it will be deterministic, the same way as anything else is deterministic.
Yeah, I mean,
But in reality, everything is
quantitative guarantees.
Nobody can give any other guarantees, I would argue.
So Tao's
This
question.
is a philosophical thing.
Well, but Tao's question is also maybe kind of there may be kind of a wording issue here because you would be satisfied with set-based guarantees.
I would mean that, for example, it's not yes, no.
Yeah.
I know that there is always error, but I would like to see like some level, some.
Yeah, you can have a level. Yeah. So I work a lot at Mälardalen. They work a lot on safety. So I work with the safety people. So we say that the channel can always be in outage. So as long as you have deadlines, there's always a chance that you have outage. If you don't have deadlines, then we can give deterministic guarantees. As long as you have deadlines, we can't. So we can have outage. So then we define, instead of outage, which is a communication thing, we say safety outage. So we can try to define the safety outage as a function of something, transient things in communication that will make the safety things go. So then we can, once we have defined the safety outage, we can try to minimize it, the occurrence of it or durations of it. So this is the way we can work with it. But that would be true also in wired communication. There's no difference. It's just that they forgot about that the models are not accurate enough.
But the algorithm themselves are probabilistic, or
Sorry?
the algorithm themselves are probabilistic. So, for example, choosing my slot.
In this case, no, it was nothing deterministic with this. Everybody was choosing their slots according to a deterministic algorithm. So this slot is always for beacon vehicle 2. This one is always beacon vehicle.
Yes, but before you introduced this method where they could choose it themselves, right?
Yeah, that's what's the MAC part. And this is the best you can do if you have an ad hoc structure. Then you don't know how many vehicles you have or how many nodes you have. Then that's the best you can do.
And then?
But then if you have a platoon, you can do better because you have a set of members. There's admission control and things. So then you can do better. But there also the requirements are more strict because they need to drive tighter together. But if you have a completely distributed one without having a platoon, that's the best you can do. Here, I don't have that. In platooning, deterministic MAC.
And the platoon length is not practically restricted by the lengths of the number of available slots.
And well, yeah, practically everything is limited. In practice, infinitely long is 3. But
Is what? Infinitely long is what? Is 3?
Infinitely many is 3, around 3. So in practice, there's a lot of constraints. In theory, there's no constraints. So if there's no communication range, we just relay or multi-hop. So this is no problem. In practice, each vehicle is around 22 meters. So if you have 5 vehicles, you're already blocking exits and on-ramps and off-ramps. So either we will need to have a lane for platooning, or in the beginning when we have some non-automated vehicles, you need to do this harmonica thing, so that they will automatically extend the distances, so that people can sneak out on the off-ramps, or merge in the on-ramps, and then they go closer again. So they go closer, so they save fuel, but they are further apart when you have on and off-ramps. So this will be in practice. In theory, there's no problem.
So the idea was if someone wants to get through to an exit, they communicate.
Yeah, exactly. So once everybody is communicating, you don't need to do this harmonica thing. They will just work.
Other questions? I have another quick question. You mentioned one probabilistic algorithm, which is the conflict resolution. If you try to get a slot, or if you want to transmit.
You're still on the MAC part, not on the platooning part.
On the MAC part.
Yeah.
And is that used in the platooning scenario?
No, we don't use this one in platooning.
That's not used at all.
That will give a jitter.
Yes.
That doesn't work if you have platooning, and it's too. Yeah.
So
but then you have a stable network structure, so you don't need self-organizing. You can be centralized.
So in the that's exactly, yeah. So in the platooning, there's no probabilistic algorithms at all. But in other contexts,
well, it's probabilistic algorithms in the sense that you don't know which relayer you're going to select, because that depends on the channel, and that is a probabilistic, stochastic.
So one thing is if the randomness is coming from the outside, and one thing if we use randomness internally to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So this one uses
but the
randomness.
randomness here is still bounded.
Yeah.
So you just randomize within this one.
Yeah.
So the other one, having the other one is completely random. We know nothing about nothing. But here it's bounded randomness.
But here we make a random choice, right?
We make a random choice within very strict limits.
Yeah. And
so it's still possible to calculate. It's deterministic within these bounds.
Yes. Yeah. Random but bounded, and the other one we have.
And you can calculate how, like, probabilities of picking the same slots consecutively with this and this and this. And this you can also minimize by extending the selection intervals. The more you extend it, the less likely you will collide, but also you will have the bounds that are less tight, so it become more random.
But for the other one, there's no randomness in the algorithms themselves. All the randomness comes from the outside.
It's a randomness because you select a random back-off time, and it's random how long you need to wait if a channel is busy
so
all the time.
So we still
yeah,
do that.
That's the completely randomness. There's no bound in anything. It's just nonsense.
And that's
the environment. So is the algorithm itself. Does
the random back-off.
Yes,
yes. The random back-off is it stops.
If the channel is busy,
time.
this is a random function. If the channel is busy, I randomize a back-off time.
Yeah.
Two random things. Unbounded.
Okay, whether it is busy, it is random from the outside. It is externally random.
Yes.
Yeah.
But internally random is this back-off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is also a function of the external one, twice. So first it's external ones, because I need to wait a random time, and then I start to count down my back-off time. And this is random when I get to do this, because it also depends on the outside. So it's outside, inside, outside.
But in your analysis, you don't do CSMA, or
In my analysis.
in your analysis of the platoon scenario.
In my analysis of the platoon scenario, I have a TDMA,
STDM.
non-self-organizing TDMA on top of it.
Okay.
So it means that every time somebody comes down to sense the channel, it finds it free. If I can remove the CSMA, it would even be better, because otherwise you can put a jammer and nobody gets to transmit anything.
Okay,
so I want to remove it, but
okay.
but I put TDMA on top.
Okay.
To be able to use existing hardware.
Okay.
But I would prefer to change it, but they didn't allow me.
Okay. Okay. Good. I'm glad we're asking all these questions, because yes, very good. This clarifies things a lot. Thank you.
There are also similar problems that in industry or an application, things come in which are not completely clean, but once they are in, it is very hard to change them. So also with programming languages, a lot of such things happen. Also in class-based languages, there are some things after, now we know you could have done it better, but it started and then it was its use, you cannot change it.
And now they're doing it again. I don't get it.
And also in UML or in Simulink, which were introduced without semantics, and they used, and then it is very hard to clean up afterwards.
Working with
If
the real
we
world.
build in base stations in this, it will never be able to remove it ever again.
But here's a question. So if the CSMA is there, and you're doing TDMA on top of it, there should be no conflicts. And if there should be no conflicts, then the CSMA should be as if it's not there. Or,
As long as it comes a non-platoon member, you need to deal with those two.
okay, but let's imagine this same scenario with CSMA and without CSMA. With CSMA, there would be conflicts, and then what happens to the TDMA?
Yeah, it becomes an administrative function.
You won't be able to transmit on your slot, and so that guaranteed.
Yeah,
that
so
plan.
the TDMA is on top.
Yeah.
So it's your slot, you're allowed to access the CSMA thing.
Yeah.
The only time you're allowed to access the CSMA thing, it's during your slot. And once you are there, if CSMA messes it up...
you go to the next slot, you go to your time.
No.
What happens? You just, the message is
Yeah,
lost?
yeah.
Okay.
So TDMA
message
becomes
is lost.
administrative completely.
Okay. And then if the message is lost in that scenario, if we just have the TMA and we don't have the CSMA, and the other car comes and interferes next to the platoon, what happens to the TMA in that setting?
It works.
It still works even though there's interference on the channel, even though the channel is busy.
It's not interference, it's TDMA, right?
But the random car that comes in outside of the system...
It would also be using TDMA, or?
No. The point is that it's just a random... Yeah.
Ah, okay. Then it will be the same as...
Because...
The random car comes in, it transmits here, this packet is lost.
Yeah.
But I have some relay nodes, because the channel behaves bad anyway. it would just be one slot lost, and that's why I have
Ah,
event-driven
okay.
number of ones. That's why I need to have
So,
several.
so it's still better than when you have the CSMA underneath.
Yes, much, much better.
Okay.
And it's not sensitive to security issues either. So stupid.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Technology doesn't win over economy
Okay.
or politics.
So what if there is such a platoon using whatever protocol, and then there are these things that, what is the name of these small things that can fly?
Drone.
If it comes,
Drone,
drones,
yeah.
the drone comes and occupies the whole, just disturbs. What would they do? Do they have a phone?
That's why we need to have the spectrum. It can't be used by Wi-Fi stuff, drones coming around, messing up the safety. That's why they need the spectrum. That's why you can't let anybody in. You were saying yesterday,
What does
can't,
it mean they can't?
They're
it's-
not-
allowed
They're not allowed
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Yeah, come on. Terrorists are killing, so it is not allowed to.
No, but
So what
terrorists are a
happens?
different problem.
What happens
We,
then?
we
but
kind
that
of all
would be,
agree
it's like
that-
asking why do we use keys? Because terrorists can make copies of keys.
Yeah,
I
sure,
mean-
but it is a certain level of security,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
Yes.
same thing here.
But so what happens then? I mean, they must need a fallback option, something.
No, but it's the I mean, if you will not be able to, if you wanted, if this works and legislation works, you will not be able to build a drone using it. It's like you can fake keys. It's the same thing. You could fake a
Yeah.
drone thing here. So if you want to mess with things, you will always be able to.
Yeah, but
So there's no
once
difference
we know
with
that-
communications and keys.
That's true, but once we know that it is possible, we always try to come up with new things.
Yeah, but we know it's possible to fake keys. It's the exact same problem.
Yeah, but then we have, for example, there are some possibilities to have a security. You have an additional card, and without this card, you cannot reproduce the key. Because people copied key without allowance, so they try to come up with something avoiding, or there is always the good and the bad fighting. So we also need some fallback, like in the simplex method, right? Where you see something goes wrong, where you can fall back to something safe without.
Yeah. No, but we always use all the other stuff that I was talking on in the first lecture. So if you want to interfere with this, the drone would have to send a jamming signal. We will always still use frequency hopping and all kinds of other stuff. It's going to be the same. So this is just the major things, and we will still use the small things, everything that we talked on the first lecture. Which will be the same as having an extra thing so that you can't copy a key. Bad things will still happen in the world.
You didn't solve all of the world's problems
No,
with
not
this.
yet.
Okay, we will try to keep that in mind. It's an important problem, but of course it's beyond the scope of this particular
Yes,
work.
it
Yeah.
is just that I think we always have to have that in mind, because the more autonomous systems we
Yeah.
introduce, the larger this danger is.
Security is very
I would
tough.
worry more, but maybe because I'm a communication guy, I would worry more about software than communications. It's completely man-made and crazy. This is at least nature. You can measure something. You can't measure if the software.
All right, we have
So
to
I
talk,
would worry
we have to
about
talk
the
about that more offline. All right, any other questions? It's very, very good discussions, by the way. It helps us kind of connect the different parts of CPS.
Somebody's taking pictures through the door.
Oh, wow.
Is that allowed?
It's a communications issue. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? Elisabeth, thank you very much for this great sequence of presentations. It's kind of sad that it comes to an end, but I learned a lot personally, and it was very, very informative.
I can try to shape up the slides for the last when I upload them.
You'll
Because now
upload.
I was just
Okay, great, excellent. So since this is the last lecture, we have a small thing. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much, Elisabeth. Thank you.
Thanks.